are you?
Right here.
I've been waiting for this for a long time.
That was my name. Once. But I threw it away.
Do you want to die?
A voice. I remember you. Think you can defeat me? The man who taught you how to fight? What a fool. Come on, boy. Come try me.
Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and I am so insanely excited to finally be reviewing to you guys Fire Emblem Path of Radiance for the GameCube. I've actually been a humongous fan of this game ever since it came out. Yes, I was on the bandwagon when it was brand new and actually cost in the double digits of money. And this was actually the first Fire Emblem game I ever played, and I think it was the first RPG I played, because I don't remember if I played Paper Mario sooner rather than later. But this was an eye-opening game for me to teach me that, characters can die and won't be resurrected, and there's no such thing as a one-up mushroom in these kinds of games. It also proved how gaming could tell an immersive story and really get you hooked on the characters besides just, oh, that guy teaches you your moves, that guy transforms you, but to have actual personalities that develop over time. Coming from someone whose prior experience to storytelling was Ocarina of Time, Super Mario 64, and Banjo-Kazooie, you can definitely see what the big fuss was about. However, I imagine that the majority of you watching this review are actually people that got hooked into the Fire Emblem series through either Awakening, Fates, or Three Houses. And so you're probably wondering, okay, first of all, this is an older generation Fire Emblem game that hasn't been ported. And second, this is an old Fire Emblem game, so is it going to be user-friendly enough? Well, let me just say that if you wanted to buy this and you're turned off by the steep, expensive $100 to $200 price range nowadays, well, I certainly don't want you to spend that much. That would be ridiculous. But I do think this game has by far enough quality to warrant that price, even if I personally wouldn't pay that. So for starters, let's talk about how the system has, I guess, changed over the years. So for starters, well, I would say this is definitely newbie-friendly enough. The tutorials do a good job of easing you into the basics of the game. The weapon triangle is explained better than any other Fire Emblem game to date, and the characters are really strong. There's a reason why Ike is considered the most popular lord in the Fire Emblem series, although Edelgard might have surpassed him since then, I'm not really sure. But I do know that Ike is one of the most popular, and after replaying this, now I'm re-seeing why he was one of my favorite video game protagonists for a while. There's no casual mode in this game though, so when units die, they die for good. There's also not an option to battle save or to rewind the clock. So if you lose a battle or if one of your units dies, you either have to deal with it or you have to just reset the whole level, which can be a little bit tiresome and tedious, but thankfully the GameCube restarts relatively easily. There's also the fact that rather than having a hub world and a grand majority of supports and world maps to travel along, Path of Radiance instead gives you what's called the battle base, which is entirely menu driven. There's not really any 3D exploration to be found, and during that time you have options to give bonus experience to your units to help them level up faster than you would just by progressing through the game. You can also view support conversations here, which are thankfully way more engaging than they are in Radiant Dawn. And you can also forge weapons from scratch, get some information from NPCs that'll give you a hint for how to proceed in the coming battles. And it does a good job of allowing the player to feel like they don't have to grind. Well, at the same time, because you only get so many increments of the base, you have to use it wisely. You can't just willy-nilly distribute experience. And finally, perhaps the biggest difference that's going to make or break this purchase is that even though it may look kind of like an anime, it really isn't. Like, besides the fact that these characters have big eyes, with the exception of Oscar, and weird colored hair. This is more or less a traditional game in the biggest sense of the word. The violence is ridiculously tame. There's not really a whole lot of weird moments that don't feel grounded in reality. Like, you really feel like this is a believable story and a true world where these events could theoretically happen in a sword and sorcery type of setting. You don't feel like the characters are doing these unnatural feats, and there's not a whole lot of wooing and dating aspects, although support conversations are there. But overall, this is more focused on telling a good story as opposed to trying to please a mainstream audience. And perhaps that's why I like it, but I'm also an old timer. Now, let's get into the meat and potatoes of what makes Path of Radiance so great. Now, this follows the design philosophy that I praised in games such as Twilight Princess, where they didn't try to reinvent the series, but instead they perfected it. I won't go over the 3 rules that I've bored you guys with in the past, but let's just say that this doesn't do a whole lot to transition the Fire Emblem series into a whole new genre like, say, Three Houses did. But rather, it takes what worked in the Game Boy Advance games, and presumably the other games that came out in Japan, and makes it so that essentially the bare minimal of effort was done to transition into 3D. Sure, the battles are in full 3D now, although you can still make them appear only on the map if you don't want the animations to take too long. The houses and treasure chests also take up 3D space as opposed to just being another square on the map. There are also even cutscenes that are voice acted, albeit the GameCube wasn't that great at sound mixing, so a lot of the voice acting gets unfortunately muffled by the instrumentation, and it often feels like they're mumbling their lines. That being said, I like the casting overall. Like, I think Ike's voice actor sounds like how I would imagine Ike sounding, and so on. But the audio mixing was just too terrible to really appreciate them delivering their lines, and I really hope there's a remake of this game so that we can hear them in their full glory. There's also the addition of a new unit known as Lagoos, which are half human, half animal. The more dirty term for it is subhuman, but thankfully I am not prejudiced, so I'm going to call them by their proper name, Lagoos. Essentially, in regular Fire Emblem games, you select a weapon and see if that weapon is effective against the enemy. Lagoos, on the other hand, use themselves as a weapon. So if you've got a cat, the cat's just going to scratch the opponent. And so all they really need are their claws to do battle. The downside is that even though the claws don't wear out, their energy can wear out by being in animal form for too long. So the player has to micromanage when to take the animals out so that they don't just turn into their human form and essentially just sit there and all they can do is dodge enemy attacks rather than actually fight back. This adds a whole new mechanic to the game because it's essentially a prelude to the Fire Emblem series eventually straying away from weapon durability in games like Fates and Echoes. It also does a good job of allowing you to have further diversity in the roster instead of moaning about the lack of new classes, of which there's not really a whole lot. This doesn't do a lot to make the series feel revolutionary, as I said before. Even the, quote, new weapons are just alternate names for weapons that already existed in the GBA game, just trying to ground it more in reality. So you could say that this is about as little effort as you could possibly imagine going into 3D. However, that is not to say that this game is bad because of it. On the contrary, this is my second favorite Fire Emblem so far, and the main reason why that is because the pacing, the story, and the characters are so well executed that it's worth the lack of innovations. The characters don't have too much staying power. Like, a lot of these early game characters kind of just disappear after the first act, which is really unfortunate. But on the other hand, when the characters do last, they're among the most likable characters in the entire series because they don't try too hard to be anime or fan servicey. Most of these characters start out as simple mercenaries, and then slowly as you get beyond the initial chapters, you begin to realize the different cultures of Tellius, which is the continent where this takes place on, and you get to see like, oh, okay, that's cool that Ike's perspective isn't the only one. And I really like Ike a lot. Get it? Like Ike, the presidential slogan. Because he's kind of a straightforward talker. He doesn't try to be all fancy schmancy like the other nobles. He's just like, I'm a mercenary, I exist to get my job done, and he gradually grows from that simple mindset to a more far-reaching guy. But at the same time, he stays true to himself the whole time and doesn't bend over to popular demands. There's also the fact that the difficulty progression is done really well here. Unlike Radiant Dawn, the game feels like it gradually continues to introduce the new mechanics to you while not feeling overwhelming, to the point where one level you're breezing through the enemies and the next you feel like you're all of a sudden going to be clobbered. There is one level that is the exception to that, and to avoid spoilers, I'll just say it's the level in the snow with the birds. You all know what I'm talking about if you've gotten that far. That level was frustrating as heck. But apart from that, it does feel like your units start out as a bunch of ragtag mercenaries that grow up to be powerful warriors that can one or two shot kill any enemy, and this amount of growth is extremely satisfying. I also really like how it sets the groundwork really well for the conflict to come in Radiant Dawn. The world building in this game is exquisitely done, with each nation having its own laws and politics and ways of thinking. And overall, even though you really only play from Ike's perspective, which is, I guess, the area where Radiant Dawn excels, is giving you that multiple views point of view, at the same time, you refine that perspective. And you begin to see, like, okay, is Ike perfectly in the right here? Or maybe some of his actions were unjustifiable. So I guess you could say that one perspective works well as a storytelling device because it allows you to really, I guess, get so immersed in this path that it allows you to question everything in Radiant Dawn. So overall, I would say that Path of Radiance is not only one of the best Fire Emblem games by providing an engaging turn-based strategy game that perfects the already great Fire Emblem formula and stands on its own really well even compared to the contemporary Fire Emblems, because it takes place in its own universe, and really the only other game to have built off of this world is Radiant Dawn, its sequel. But I still think that the ending of this game is satisfying enough where even if you didn't play Radiant Dawn, you'd still felt like it was a well-deserved finale. I mean, when I first beat this, I didn't even know Radiant Dawn was going to exist, and I still felt satisfied. So I'm sure you'll probably feel the same way too, although you also don't have the benefit of being around during the time that this was new like I did. So I feel kind of sorry for you, but at the same time, I also think that now that this game is newer and in the era of the internet, you can really look up how to get all the amazing supports and get the best characters, and I think you could enjoy the game a lot more than my brothers and me, where we had to brutally force our way to find the solutions that made this game seem a breeze upon replaying. This is not a stupidly easy game. You're definitely going to have some trial and error moments and some where did that guy come from encounters. But overall, I think this game isn't nearly as hard as most people make it out to be, and the tutorials do a great job of easing you into the difficulty. So with that, I do hope you can find a way to get it for less than $200. But if you do happen to pay that much money because you're so desperate to play this masterpiece of a story, know that it'll be worth every penny. So with that, thank you very much for watching. If I missed anything, I almost forgot to talk about the music. The music is also phenomenal. It's like kind of sort of orchestrated. I'm not sure if it actually was or not because the GameCube sound system wasn't exactly perfect, but it is definitely one of the better soundtracks in old Fire Emblem history. Maybe not as good as Three Houses, but it's definitely up there, especially compared to Radiant Dawn's MIDI mess. Okay, so with that, I actually thank you for watching. Let me know if there's anything I missed in the comments section. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and let's hope that Nintendo and Intelligent Systems will keep in mind how great this game was despite the sales saying otherwise. Bye for now.